In today's lab, we're going to look at the difference between clustered, dispersed, and random data. We're going to use the major airports across the United States to examine this, and then we're going to look at the airports in two different states, California and Montana. So let's start by adding in, we already have the US outlines of the states here. Let's start by adding in that airport data. So we'll go in here and we'll add in the shapefile, the US airports. Click add. You can see they're spread across the U.S. There's airports up in Alaska and down in the Virgin Islands and over in Hawaii as well. We might eliminate those just because by the nature of them, they're going to show up as very clustered with some big space in between those and the contiguous U.S. So to look at this as more of a better example of clustered versus unclustered, because obviously if you had Canada in here, you would have some other airports dispersed in here that might change how the distribution would look. Obviously, you wouldn't have that with Hawaii because you have the ocean, or with the Virgin Islands. But we'll break it down so we're only looking at the airports in the contiguous U.S. to start with. So along those lines, let's go through it and let's break out some of that data so that we can have those three data sets ready for analysis. So the first thing we're going to do is let's take out all of the airports that are in the contiguous U.S. There's multiple ways to do this. I'm going to show you this first method because we can they're spatially isolated. So we can just go like this. We can go through. We can select all of those points, right? And now if we go into airport and we go to data, we can export this data. We export it as a shapefile. So we're going to save it into our Lab1 folder, and let's call this con US airports. We just say save. Say OK. I'm going to say yes. We'll add it to there. And so here you see if we then go and clear our selection, we can turn off the outside of the contiguous U.S. airports, and we have this set here. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to isolate those that are in Montana and those that are in California, because we're going to look at a state that obviously, just glancing at it has very clustered population centers and lots of airports in those population centers versus a state that's got a relatively good dispersion of airports across the whole state and very few clusters. So to do that, we'll do a different method here. We'll go up and we'll do selection, and we'll do select by attribute. And let's select by attribute. And we can use the contiguous U.S. airports, right? Because those airports that we selected are the states are down in the contiguous U.S., so it's fine. So we can go down here, and we have state is one of our options. So we're going to select out of this shapefile all the ones that have the state that is equal to, and if we get our unique values here, California. We double click on that. We say OK. There you go. And see, now you have just those airports that are in California are selected. We do the same thing here. We right click. We go down to data. We do export data. We pick where we're going to put it. And let's call this California airports. We can just call it CA. Say save. And say OK. We're going to add it to our data set. And then we can do the same thing here where we can clear our selection. And we can do a selection, select by attribute. And once again, we have this down here. We can actually just delete that. and get our unique values again. You could also type this in. But the nice thing about getting the unique values is it makes sure that all of your everything, for starters, just in case the program has something different in there than what you think is the abbreviation for the state of Montana, which is MT, but it also has all the punctuation correct. So the single quotation around the outside, all the spacing is correct and things like that. So if you mess that up in here, it will change how well, for starters, a lot of times it won't work. Sometimes it will actually change how the selection works. There we go. We have all the airports up in Montana are selected. We do the same thing here. We go contiguous US airports, data, export data. We'll do the same thing here. So we're going to call this Montana airports. And we'll say save. Okay. And yes. All right. So now we can see if we clear our selection, and they actually come in different colors. So you can see the Montana airports are a different color from the rest of the contiguous US, and so are the California ones. So now that we have the data set up how we want it, we can do our analysis. All right, to do our analysis, it's a relatively quick, simple analysis. So we want to go over here to our spatial statistical tools in the toolbox. If you don't have your toolbox open yet, you should click up here to Arc Toolbox, and that will open up your Arc Toolbox over here on the side. So we go to our spatial statistic tools, click on the plus sign there, and we want to go to Analyze Patterns, and then we want to go to Average Nearest Neighbor, and we'll double click on that. And this will open up a dialog. It opened up on my other screen, but here you can see what the dialog looks like. And you can see here over on the side, like any of the other tools, it's got an explanation of what your output is going to be and how you add in things. So if you scroll down here, you can see, you know, kind of their definition of what clustered is versus dispersed. So if we're going to do our input feature, let's go with the contiguous US first. We're going to use our Euclidean distances, and we're going to generate a report. All right, and we say OK. And now to review our results, so sometimes you get a little pop-up down here. Since I'm running two windows, I think it popped up somewhere else. You can go up to geoprocessing and go down to results and click on that. And then this will open up our average nearest neighbor distance results. And you can see here that we have all of our values here that we're looking for. So the main ones we're looking at are our nearest neighbor ratio here. In the instructions that have this listed as a D value. We also then have our Z-score, and we have our p-values, which are important to look at. So if our Z-score, or not, excuse me, if our ratio here is less than 0, that means that these that the airports are clustered, and then our Z-score shows whether or not that data is significant. And if it's less than negative 1.96, then it shows that they're significant values greater with a 95% confidence interval. So this is significant data, and these are clustered values. So this value is less than 0, and this is less than the negative 1.96. So that shows us that the airports in the US are clustered. All right, so then what we'll do is we'll repeat this step for the California data and for the Montana data. So let's do that real quick here. We'll get Toolbox open again. Average nearest neighbor. Our input feature will be California airports. We'll generate our report. Say OK. It's working down here, doing our thing. Now we can click on results, and we can go here and we can go to this session right here. We can see that our ratio has changed, but it's still less than 0. Our z-score is not in the less than 1.96 value, so well, that means that this data is not as significant. We could still look at it and say, all right, this is potentially useful data, but it doesn't fall within that 95% confidence interval. And our p-value also would be less than 0.05 in that case as well. So we have a higher p-value. So this data, even though it's showing that we have a slightly clustered grouping there, we don't have the same significance with the data. So let's run our final analysis, and we'll go average nearest neighbor, and we can go here and we can put in the Montana airports. We'll generate our report, say okay, and go to results, and we can drop down those latest results. Here you have a ratio that's greater than 0, so that says they're dispersed. Our z-score is 1.75, so it's not greater than the 1.96 or less than the negative 1.96. So once again, we're looking at data that is not significantly significant or statistically significant at the 95% confidence interval, but it is slightly dispersed. So once again, with these values, if you don't have that 95% confidence interval, it doesn't mean it's not necessarily significant. It just means within that confidence interval, we're not fitting into it. So you can change how your confidence intervals fit. Say if you have data that's a little bit uglier, like some physics is much higher confidence intervals for their statistical significance, and some wildlife data, since you're dealing with wildlife and some unpredictability of natural systems, you have much lower confidence intervals. So like if you have a 70% confidence interval, that's pretty good for wildlife, but 95 would not be acceptable for a lot of physics. So keep that in mind when you're looking at these. So basically, though, that is the end of the analysis for this. So you'd want to keep these values here. You'd write them down, or you just switch back and forth in between this view and your layout view. But the next thing we want to do is we want to make a map. Okay, so in order to make a map, let's go to our layout view, or to, our layout view. And then we want to change this, since we're looking at the contiguous US. Let's make it so, let's zoom to that value. All right, since this kind of lends itself to being a landscape view, let's switch this view to landscape. So if we right click over here outside of our layer field, we can go to page and print setup, and we'll change this to landscape. We can keep it letter, and we say okay. There we go. And now we can adjust this so that it fits into the layout view a little bit better. And as you can see, we're going to have plenty of room to put in our legends and any sort of data text or any sort of text we'd want to put, as well as everything else. Because it's a contiguous US, I don't know that I'd bother putting in a scale bar. Maybe we will. We'll look and see how that's going to work. It's a little bit hard at this scale to have a scale bar that is meaningful. All right, so let's go back in. We'll zoom to that layer again. It's all right. We can see the islands down here. We'll just leave those in. That's fine. So, looks like we have Puerto Rico down there. So, okay. We have our airports here. We have all the U.S. ones. We have the the California ones, and the Montana ones. We might want to change our coloring slightly just to make them a little bit more obvious. But it actually shows up okay of what are the Montana airports and the California airports and the U.S. airports. So perhaps we'll leave that alone, but we will want to make a legend here. The other thing I might do is change my U.S. state color. That color's, we'll see. Let's see if we can come up with something a little bit better. Though keeping in mind that we don't want to obscure these points, so we don't want to go with something that's too dark. So this color might actually be our best option. So if we double click on that, we can get some values here. We can look at our fill colors. You know, honestly, we could go with a light gray and see how that looks. It doesn't look too bad. Let's make the Montana airports a little bit brighter red. They're blending in a little bit. That works a little bit. And let's make the California airports perhaps a little bit brighter yellow. Perhaps that one. That seems to work all right. All right, so we have all of that set up. And now what we can do is we can add in our other features for this. So let's shift this over so it's centered. We can actually click on it and then control click on. Oh, never mind. Can't do that yet. All right. So in here, we can leave the border around this if we want, or we can remove it. So let's go in and we will go to our insert and our neat line for that, and we'll turn our neat line off. So we'll just go up to none, say OK. And then we want to go here on our page. We want to go insert, neat line. We want to place it inside the margins, 5-point gap. Then we'll give it a 2. Let's do a heavy inside margin. See, we have margins here. So what this did is these are the margins for my printer. So let me actually change that. Let me go into our print and page setup. And we have brother here. We can just turn that off. We don't have to use that. So that should change our margins slightly. Or we can even bump them out too. There we go. All right, that looks a little cleaner, a little nicer. Let's zoom in a little bit more. Okay, so then we want to add in a title. So we'll go insert, we go into text, and that opened up. Oh, there you are. All right, so let's see what we want to call this. We could do airport distribution. Or airport distribution analysis. Center it. Let's go ahead and change our symbol. I want to go with, let's go Times New Roman and make it 22, 24% in bold. Let's see how that looks. And say okay. That looks pretty good. We can maybe even go a little bit bigger. So we go into our change symbol. Let's bump that up to say 28 or maybe even 36. We'll say okay. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. So if we click on that and then we control and we can click on this and then we'll go up and we'll center both of those over each other. So there's our airport distribution analysis. Title, let's add in a legend. So insert legend. I don't think that we need the U.S. states. We might actually add that into our title. So we'll say maybe contiguous U.S. airport distribution analysis or something like that. We wouldn't necessarily have to do that, but let's see here. So we have those. We can say next. We have our legend. Let's change this back to Times New Roman, just because everything else was. Except we don't actually need a legend title, right? Never mind. But let's put a border around it. Alright. Because you notice that when we done that, let's apply to all labels. I don't know why they didn't apply that to all of them. All right, so there we go. Now we have this isn't an aerial either, which is nice. We want to keep that all similar. And we can just say okay for right now. You can see now that there's still our abbreviations and everything here. So let's go up and we'll actually change our titles here. So we have Montana airports. California airports. Contiguous U.S. airports. Did I spell that right? I think so. Let me check that. Yep, contiguous U.S. airports. So that changes it here because we haven't changed this or moved it around at all, and that works. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that. I don't think that we need to really change any of our symbols there or change anything around. So we don't even have to change that that legend to text. We can keep it as is. So it's okay where it's at right now. Let's we can think about some things a little bit. We might dang it. Let's back, move you back, click off there. There we go. Okay, let's maybe move it up there. Gives us a little bit more room for some text here. And what we can do here is we can think about how we're going to import a spreadsheet. Now this might be easiest if you did a spreadsheet in Excel and then just brought that Excel spreadsheet in instead of trying to create a table inside of Arc. That's up to you on how you want to do that. So I think that's probably what I'll do. I'll just do that off screen and then import it in. All right, so we have this table inserted here. And it shows our airport locations, our, except for I'm an idiot. All right. And shows our airport locations, our nearest neighbor ratio, our z-score, and our p-value for each one of those. So that table is inserted in there. Let's insert a north arrow. Let's go with the simple one. Find a good place for it. Over here is not bad. And then we want to put in our source data. And in this case, our source data is Esri. So we can go up here, we'll insert text, drag it down to where we want it, double click on it. We will change our symbol so we don't forget. Make this Times New Roman. Say okay, and then we want to say source. Esri. Say okay. And then we want to put our name, doing the same thing. On the other side. So we'll go insert text, click off of it, drag it over, double click on it, go to change symbol, Times New Roman, say okay, and put Morgan Davies and today's date, 1/17/21. We'll say okay. Let's double click on that again. We want to make it right side justified because it's going to go up against the right side there. We'll say all right. And so in this case, let's get our spacing here so it looks nice. But then we can go and we can control click over on this one, and we can use our line up tools here. Let's make the top of them even. All right, so in that case, we need to move this up a tiny bit. There we go. Okay, so the top of those are even. Let's go over here. We'll click on this, and we'll click on that, and we'll make the left side of them even, which it looked like it was. Spacing looks all right there. We do have a little bit of white area. We could add in a scale bar if we wanted to, just to fill up some of the area. I don't know that is necessary. Okay, finally what we want to do is we want to export our map as a PDF so we can turn it in. So we go up to File, we go to Export Map, choose your name for your map and your location, click Save, and it will export the map, and that will be saved into that folder that you chose. Don't forget to save your MXD files. You should be doing that regularly throughout your project, so just in case something crashes, you don't have to recreate everything. So that's it. What we have for our distribution analysis for the day, and we'll continue on with similar things next week.